let's see, now we're going to have our last session, which is going to have a little bit of presentation involved from three gentlemen up here on the front. They're each going to speak about their projects for just 5 minutes. This session, the topic of this session is open source projects for AR, because standards are not the only way to achieve interoperability in open systems. So we're going to talk about open source AR projects as well as web-based AR projects, and some of them intersect where they're open source and web-based. So I'd like to welcome up to the stage then Blair, MacIntyre, Rob Manson, and Fridolin Wild. Do any of you need my, I'll just leave my adapter up here, and you can, well, it looks like Rob's got one. Who's going to be starting? Is it you, Rob? Are you going to do this? Okay, then it's Blair. Then Blair's going to start. Do you need my adapter, Blair? No. Okay.
I'm sure it'll work.
I think it will too. Thank you. Just make sure you get it back to me. I'll be lost without it. So what we're going to have is 3 short presentations, 5 minutes each. Then we're going to have a panel discussion about the open source projects and the web-based AR that they've been working on. And so I'll be thinking about possible questions. We've got some things we know we're going to start off with. Session's only going to last 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more. And then we'll go into the demos of the interoperable browsers and the workplace activity model. All right. How's that working? Excellent. Much less dancing. Thank you, Blair.
De-dancing, yes. Okay. Well, thank you guys for all hanging in this long. So I'm Blair MacIntyre. I'm a professor at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. I've been doing AR for a number of years. And so this session is, as Christine said, about open source and in particular web-based approaches to doing augmented reality. So over the course of the last few hours, you've heard a bunch of things about various technology and standards and other kinds of issues that are attempting to solve a number of the problems that are holding AR back. So you've heard a bunch of people actually refer to sort of, oh, if we can solve this, then maybe finally augmented reality will be useful. And so there's a bunch of reasons, sort of, both secondary reasons, various technologies, and primary technological reasons that AR hasn't really caught on now. In our research right now at Georgia Tech and related to web-based AR, I'm particularly actually interested in something that hasn't been brought up much, which is the stuff I boldfaced there, which is this issue of simultaneously displaying multiple disparate sets of AR. So the AR browsers, Layar, Wikitude, Genio, attempt to do this by sort of throwing everything into kind of a soup that you can search. And for certain kinds of content, that's actually really good, especially geo content. But if you think about apps, if you think about the sort of the way we consume non-trivial AR, so going back to your my 3D model, you can't just render it in an arbitrary way. Stuff isn't just data; it's also the entire sort of process and application logic that goes along with what you're displaying. Right? Amazon isn't just a bunch of things that are sold. There's a whole process underlying there, a lot of which is in the cloud, a lot of which is in the system that defines what it means to shop and go to Amazon.com as a website. So if you start thinking about non-trivial things where you're going to want to create a whole app, and then you think about how would I display those at the same time in a head-mounted display? Am I going to switch apps? Or am I going to have a system that lets me sort of simultaneously display multiple things and have them coexist? So that's sort of a research interest we have in the project that I'm going to mention. And in parallel, if you think about, say, a mobile phone, it would be really nice if phones let us have multiple apps, right? It'd be great if I opened up my iPhone, flipped up the camera, and now all of the AR apps that I happen to have running were displaying their content over the camera feed. Wouldn't that be fabulous? And it might actually allow a lot of the AR concepts that we have start to come to fruition because I wouldn't have to flip up an app and look around and see if stuff's available. So those two things, all within the ecosystem of displaying AR at the same time, is why I'm actually interested in the standardization issues, because we can't possibly have things interoperate and coexist unless there's some standards underlying there that can let this happen. Okay, so we did a version of this talk, this panel, a few months ago, actually, at this point, and I made this slide to kind of illustrate where I saw AR on the web sitting, and I did this in a few minutes on the plane. It wasn't like deeply founded in a lot of research in every possible thing that's out there, but it does illustrate what I think sort of the ecosystem looks like right now. When you think about AR on the web, there's sort of two main ways at the end of the spectrum that you can think about it. One is all of the stuff I want to do is being done with web technologies, so the pure web end. And another is we're using HTML and JavaScript as programming tools, but we might actually just be delivering apps using them. So there's these tools like Cordova and PhoneGap, Ludi that use that approach. And then there's a whole mishmash of things in between. Most of the browsers now use HTML5 in various ways, some more than others. And Martin could comment on that, because I know you guys are still working hard on that. Our Argonne project sort of fits in the middle. The stuff Rob's doing fits in there. Fridolin mentioned the interplay of AR and the web as well. So I'm not going to sort of debug that, but there's a spectrum. Okay. Briefly, Neil mentioned a bunch of the enabling technologies from Khronos. W3C has similar technologies for the web. The big issues, and Neil highlighted this at the end, from the web point of view, is that the technology that you saw on the previous slide haven't all been shipped over to the web yet. So we can do some things like Webseal and WebGL. W3C has APIs like geolocation, device orientation, and so on, that let us get at some of the information we need, but don't really do everything. In particular, if you go back to Neil's slide, the web sort of is stuck on one end of this diagram, and a whole bunch of the stuff that's actually needed to do most non-trivial augmented reality stuff, computer vision, sensor integration, all of this stuff is still not really available in the web. So the project that we've been working on for a long time now at Georgia Tech, I think we're on now starting Argonne 3. Argonne 1 came out a few years ago. Argonne 2 is available now. It's called Argonne 2 Isotope. The idea is to use the web technologies as much as we can, but expose other things from native code up into JavaScript. So we have exposed Qualcomm's Vuforia and more precise versions of the orientation and location APIs up into JavaScript. We're experimenting with how you do multiple simultaneous web apps at the same time. So in our case, right now in Argonne 2, we have a UI that's written in HTML5 JavaScript, and each individual web page is displayed in an iframe, and they're overlapping. So each one is transparent. You can have as many as you want simultaneously displayed. The research question, of course, is what is the UI that we present to a user to make that usable? And how do we then reflect that down to the app developers so that they can communicate things? Okay? So I'd be happy to talk more about this over the next day. I'm not going to be here on Thursday. To people who might be interested, is this actually going to do anything? So this is just a little video I made at one point. So this is just a video capture of Argonne, little piece of geo stuff, cube attached to a geolocation, a cube. In this case, the light red is a WebGL cube, the dark red is a CSS div, and they're both positioned together in the world attached to that Qualcomm marker. Okay, so just simplest demonstration of mixing web and or mixing geolocation and vision. Really hard to see. Mostly just wanted to illustrate. This is the web page that did that. Okay, so got normal web at the top. We've got a script in the middle that introduces, that reacts to Argonne being ready, tells it to load a Vuforia data set, reacts to these data sets being ready. The two little ellipses there One of them creates the content. This is just 3.js that I think somebody mentioned, Neil maybe. Somebody mentioned 3.js, so that's just the 3 for that content you saw. And this is the 3.js for the stuff that was on the Stones target. So here is the JavaScript that gets executed when that data set's loaded. So that's it. Okay, so that was the code and the HTML for that simple example. And this is kind of illustrative of, I think, what Rob is doing as well, what you can do in a really small amount of web code if the appropriate stuff underneath is exposed into it. So that's it. I'm not going to go into gory detail. We're just really interested in how we can advance and move forward in making it possible to do AR with the web. And my student Jarek Spagner is giving a talk tomorrow on some of his work with doing layout in a web-based environment, so helping people react and create compelling presentations. And either of us, if you catch us over the next few days, would be happy to talk about this.
So again, these are 3 short little sessions, and then we'll have discussions about all the different concepts that we're interested in.
Quick. Can you, I mean, you were so quick, can you repeat the URL? It was like on screen because you showed the URL and unplugged it. So.
I was going to say, oh, yes. Oh. Good question. No. So the URL, you could go to argon.gotech.edu is the website for our project. You can also just email me, and I'd be happy to point you at stuff. We are gradually releasing everything over the next few months on GitHub. So a bunch of the stuff, some of the stuff is there now. Yeah, if you want to ask me afterwards, I can.
Bob,
Awesome.
welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. So what I'll do is I'll just talk a bit about why I think the web is relevant for AR. So I'm probably one of the web purist extremists in the community, but I'll talk about why I think that's really important. So our focus is on unlocking AR through our web browsers. So as the slide showed, we do allow you to create content that publishes out to the mainstream AR browsers like Geneo or native applications. But so AR, everybody knows it lets you overlay info onto your view of the real world. But the process of getting access to that, we think, is too hard. So still there's this massive gap between the user knowing there's something in the world that they can experience and getting to that. And there's a massive drop-off rate at each of the steps. So if you look at what happens, first you have to explain that it exists. And the better the technology gets, the more you have to explain. As everything becomes scannable in some way, how do you know what is interactive? And then the thing that most brand advertisers hate is they have to send a customer they've acquired or a user off to another brand. You send them away to an app store. And then they have to search and find and download. So the browsers guys have done a great job with OEM deals, but there's still a massive, the majority of users don't have AR browsers installed. And then once they do that, once you've installed the app, most of the browsers have a first use experience you have to go through as well. And depending on the type of link that they got and how they got access to it, they again have to search and find the content. So there's just a lot of hurdles for the user to go through. And then once they do that, often it's just a model on a marker or some floating AR markers. There's just not the payoff there. So if you look at it as a value exchange for the amount of effort to get the reward, most users are still struggling with, why am I going through this effort? And again, for each bit of AR content that you create, often you have to go through the experience again. So our focus is combining AR with the web and smart and wearable devices and trying to create a consistent way to express these experiences across all these different devices. And I'll show some examples of how it works on the different ones. So we call this the augmented web, or augmenting the web, and we think that it's a different approach to traditional AR. So users tend to call, like Blair and I have had this discussion around the definition of AR a lot, and I really like that academic definition. There's a nice bright white line you can draw around a zoomer's definition. Users couldn't give a shit, really. They'd just call anything that's digitally magic AR. Amazon released visual search in their thing and called it AR. It's nothing to do with AR, it's visual search. Walmart's didn't respond and go, that's not true. They went, we don't need your fancy AR. Yeah, it's a head-up display. Generally, it's not AR. So I've been evangelizing this crazy sort of web approach since 2010, but now a lot of this is really demonstrable. So I agree with Blair, there are a couple of pieces missing, but we're really, really close. Hopefully if we can get the camera control API up to the web level, that'll make a huge difference. Yeah, punch him. Just punch him. Punch him.
We'll gang on.
Wake him up, yeah. And the different shader processing and things like it just makes so much sense. There's so much you can do. But let me just show some basic examples, because the first hurdle that most people... They're just a real quick video and then I'll jump out. So the problem that most people have, because I have to actually run back downstairs, most people just don't believe that this stuff works in a web browser. But it does. So this is JSR Toolkit, which was a port of AR Toolkit, which was ported to FLAR Toolkit to blah, blah, blah. So pointing it at a fiducial marker, this is running on a slow old Android device. When I turn the tracking on, the box appears. It's a little bit jittery, but that's more about the AR Toolkit model than the tracking itself, than the software. And it's got really good interactivity. It's got better interactivity than we had and often see in a lot of the AR browser interactions. So it's got a call to action on the top. You tap it, and little model, just floats out. And that's about 3 or 4 lines of definition in our open source project. But you can do more interesting things than that. You can create different interaction models. So this is using a leap and a fiducial marker. And so it creates a video texture over the fiducial marker. And so that's one type of tracking. But then I'm also using my hand tracking over the leap toolkit, the leap sensor. And then I can use that to control the flying car. And we can do gesture detection to make the car shoot and all those sorts of things. But there's a whole lot of... These are pretty crude technical demos. We've got a range of commercial projects coming out. But we've been really focusing on the last 6 months or so, just showing little proof of concepts to show the different ways you can plug the pieces together. But for us, it's the diffusion that makes the biggest change. So that hurdle you have to go through getting people to the AR experience at the moment. With the augmented web, all you have to do is send a web link, an HTTP link, and that's mostly done through social media. So somebody just posts a link, someone taps on it, and if their device supports it, it just works. We're trying to collapse that distance between users and the experience. But if you look at how big the market are, so the easiest way for us to grab this sort of data was to look at the Play Store. So this is just the Android slice, so it's not the whole market, but it gives you a good idea. So, Janeo's got 500,000, Wikitude's done a good job with 1 million, Layar's done an awesome job with 10 million. But if you look at Chrome and Firefox, there's 160 million already, and these juggernauts are doing their own distribution. These are there already. Chrome is now the default web view on Android, so if you build a native app and you put a web view into it, you've got this running inside your app anyway. And if you look at the desktop market, so it's not just mobile browsers, it's wearable displays, desktops, everything. There's 1 billion installed browsers already with WebRTC and WebGL running on them. But the projections are 3.9 billion by the end of 2016. So it's a really significant market and also the fastest diffusion model you can pick. So we think this is the best way to get AR to a really broad audience. And if you look at where we are now, so there's a letter that Ori wrote in 2009, an open letter to Apple. We're about where we were with mobile AR in 2009. Apple had locked down the camera access. At the moment, they haven't supported WebRTC. They're probably the biggest break on all of this at the moment. We're still waiting for it to evolve. But WebRTC is a juggernaut that's going to, really put a lot of pressure on them. So I think we're where we were with mobile AR in 2009, but we're accelerating at about 3 times the speed. So we're not the same as, the contemporary AR at the moment, but it's catching up really, really quickly. And by the time you build a lot of these projects, there's going to be a massive development already. So yeah, if you think about how much the web's changed our life and how much mobile's changed our life, you compare that to the combination of AR and the web, and we haven't even started to look at what's going to really be possible. But so Neil was talking about what's coming next. So there's a project Tango Device. This is, getting RGB depth sensing into these devices is a massive step forward. So I'm working with the Intel guys on an extension to the Get User Media API, which lets you access the camera on a browser. So it supports depth sensors. And for the Tango device, the Chrome team have already added Tango support inside Chrome. So inside the web browser, you can reach in and grab this depth data and do really good tracking and spatial mapping and, all sorts of interesting things. So that's my evangelism for the web.
I think these sessions are taking a little more than the 5 minutes to start, but I hope you're still hanging in there. You're still getting some content, some value.
It's okay. I've been talking already a lot, so I'll keep it brief and share the big challenges that I see. Hopefully not in pink, because the computer is not pink. Right. What better way to share challenges if not hiding behind the words of someone else? There's a really nice piece written by Langlotz and others in the communication of the ACM.
We're not hearing your audio. I don't think your speaker's turned on.
No, it should be. Yeah.
Now it is.
Now it is. Okay. Right. We're, according to Langlotz and others, now in the third wave of AR, following the first generation with location and viewpoint adaptation, the second generation with linking content to real objects out there. But the third generation, it's still not quite clear whether that's mature enough for a mass market, right? For a mass market with 4 billion browsers, there's still a couple of hurdles that need to be overcome, maybe even teething problems still that need to be overcome. And the 4 big problems that we should be working on as a community, I think Langlotz and others are speaking from my heart here, is to fix the lack of critical content. And as said before, the gold rush should be to get objects, markers, feature clouds, collect them, get them out there. That's the next big gold mine catalog, right? But it also includes more support for user-generated content. And browser producers have made huge efforts to make this better. But there's still a way to go to allow for more and better use cases. And I think that's the second one. We need to innovate better use cases. We're trying to do that in my project for the area of SMEs and manufacturing. But the efforts we do should be complemented in many other areas by many different people. The last 2 teething problems that are still around is fusion tracking across sensors. No matter where sensor data comes from, it should be unified into a single reference space. In a workplace, that quite clearly for me is the workplace model. But in a leisure space, it might be something else. And that leaves the last area, as always, there can be more and better and more exciting, even more exciting presentation techniques that we should embrace and make possible. Yeah, that's the 4 big problems that I would see.
But could you tell us about you're doing a web integration with the AR? So the sessions will sort of touch on that a little bit. I know you touched on
I think as already mentioned before, the big chance I think we have is through the availability of plugins and the like, that we can interface AR solutions with HTML5 content. And that is really exciting because it allows us to harvest a lot of different libraries, a lot of different components, and a lot of the web content that is already out there. Repurposing web contents is something that becomes possible through the integration of web technologies into browsers. That's crucial. So our stuff that we're working on, we will release that as open source, but that particularly relates to our components. and not any standard components, of course, that we use.
All right, thank you. So now I'd like to spend some time, an adequate amount of time, discussing with these gentlemen the opportunities around open source projects and the web-based augmented reality. I know Simon has a burning question. He's got both his hands up in the back there. He's so I had some questions, and I think that these gentlemen, we had a briefing before today and talked about what kinds of questions we might have, and they answered all those questions that we might stage for them, like how does augmented web differ from augmented reality we have today? What's missing? What are the pieces missing for web-based AR? So a couple of questions that you've heard them talk a little bit about. If we don't have Simon, what's your question?
I want to turn everything on its head. This is a tough problem for me. So I've developed social mobile apps. And the biggest problem for social mobile apps is connectivity between the web and the mobile app itself. Because the mobile browser doesn't support plugin architecture, so I can't do funky things in browser. I can't deliver powerful native experiences in browser. We all have a sense that that's coming. Maybe it will happen soon. Maybe it's happening. And then the other thing, I'm ready to and maybe the other thing.
That depends what you mean by powerful native, right?
And the other problem is, well, it's like, I want Unity objects in there, right?
WebGL.
The other
WebGL.
so finishing the question is,
What is the question, Simon?
I want to go from the browser to a native app just as a beginning point, right? I want to go to the social web, click on a Coke can, and then be able to launch a native AR app where I can put the Coke can on a table. That's going to be a very powerful native application experience. I'm going to be able to deliver that as a native app, whether it goes
So could I
from
restate
browser
what
to
he's
Layar
saying?
browser. How can why are we so consumed with the web when I just want to be able to get from the web to a native app and then be able to launch native apps as a first stepping stone?
Yeah, I don't think users care if it's the web or native. They just want an experience. They want to tap on something and it works.
But I write native apps.
Yeah,
we
but-
write native
but-
apps, and they work great. They're easy. And I don't
Yeah.
have to do all this web mumbo jumbo.
But there's a massive web developer audience who would say the same about native apps.
Right, and so you are not normal because
Thank you, Blair.
because
Not the majority.
you view writing a native app and shipping it and supporting it and advertising it as easier than writing a web, which is not what most people who develop content would say.
And I can show you the financials.
So one of the reasons we started working with the web, for example, is because we work with things like nonprofits. We work with nonprofits that run historic sites. They want to do tours of historic sites. We work with museums that have huge amounts of data available in web accessible services websites. Adding some stuff to those websites that lets them do mobile AR, is a huge win for them instead of developing and shipping these mobile things. So your perspective is different. Now, we developed Argon because of the very limits you talked about, right? So we can't do, right now, native 3D vision tracking stuff in most any mobile web browsers. So we did it, but that will change with time. Now, I don't know how long it will. You could ask Neil, actually, because he has a better perspective on when that will actually happen. But yeah, there's a problem right now. I mean, right now, so you have a thing, you do a URL redirect to your Coke app, and it opens it, and it's done. Now, you'll have to talk to Apple about how they install that app if it's not already on their platform. But that's the problem with apps, right? You got to download them. If they don't have them, they can't find them.
All the things that Rob so eloquently listed on his slide. Does anybody else want to counter what he said, questioning whether the web browser is the right way to go? Or
Yeah, I'm not a holy grail person. I think there's many different models on how to make an application case happen. Right? It can be an app. It can be a web resource. It can be a mixture of both. I think from a developer perspective, which you're addressing, it's a question of how much effort you have to invest into what level of user experience you can deliver. And if I look at the amount of time you spend debugging in pick any of your favorite software development environments now for AR applications, be Unity or any of the browsers mentioned today, compared to the amount of time you have to invest into getting a web resource up and going, I think there is a quite clear difference that points us in a direction, right? And since it's possible today with plugins such as Coherent UI to run web resources within native AR apps, I don't see any particular reason why as not to pursue that road. It saves a lot of time, it generates reusable components, and it is more traceable, debuggable as other environments.
I think I just want to say, as a part of the portfolio of future solutions, even if we had a mobile plugin architecture for browsers that was functional so we could build rich experiences on top of the visual overlay, and wouldn't it be nice if I had better connectivity and portable content so that I could, again, discover on the web and then launch in an app and never have a marker, never have any of that, discovery launch.
I agree with the end goal, but I totally disagree with plugins. The web is running away from plugins at a massive speed just because of all of the security and maintenance and all of the cruft that it left. It was a Flash and Adobe Reader, and they just flooded the web with holes. Open standards are the way to go. I think web-based standards.
So I mean, the mobile is problematic right now. So if you're on the desktop, if you look where the desktop is, and you look at Unreal Tournament, you look at Unity running in pure web, right? So Unity can build to HTML5 WebGL right now, and it runs pretty well. You can various browser vendors have experimented with native code extensions. There's just a whole lot going on, and Apple and Google and Microsoft aren't supporting it. Right, that will change hopefully with time. You mentioned WebGL. There's a big sort of elephant in the room in that mobile Safari. There's no WebGL on iOS, right? Because you can't do any browser stuff on iOS unless you use Apple's WebView, and it doesn't support WebGL, at least not in a browser-friendly way. The other issue with the mobile web actually is that if you can include web content in an app, but if your app downloads web content from the web unconstrained, then you have much less that you're able to do in the mobile space, because at least on iOS, because Apple restricts what you can publish. So it really is the problem right now is Apple. I love my Mac, but they are really the problem. And Google has their issues, and Microsoft has their issues, and the platforms just haven't caught up to desktop is the real problem.
But so on that issue, for Apple, and it is like the open letter that Ori did, but this device runs WebGL. I can run WebGL on it. It's that advertisers can run it. I paid for it. I bought it. It's mine. I own it. I can't run WebGL on it, even though it's on it.
Yes.
An advertiser can. That's almost what is it? You guys got the First Amendment or something?
Yeah, we have a First Amendment or something here.
Crazy thing.
I don't think the First Amendment applies to advertisers, though.
No, freedom from
Advertising is a First Amendment right.
And actually, as of today, I can say up until today, we actually had WebGL in Argonne on Apple on the App Store because we accidentally left it enabled when we submitted it, and Apple didn't notice. But when we submitted the update that's going live today, I think they caught us. So it's like one line of code, but Apple doesn't allow it.
Okay, other questions? Yes, please.
That's a follow-up question, transition. So I'll be honest, I don't know of web development. I write in Objective-C and in Unity also. The customers I work for, the big brands, you next year or two, you can't really sell them on anything that's going to happen in the web browser. For, you know, Lexus to give you an AR experience will give you luxury cars.
Sure. Yep.
So is there anything happening in the open space that will help us in the native, for native devs? You know, will we reach a point where, oh, I defined a bunch of image targets with the Euphoria SDK, but don't worry, they're going to work with this other.
Come back at 6 o'clock, would
interoperability
you?
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's,
well, you were asking two questions, I think, or one. So one comment on the first part, which is, as I think Fridolin said, you can, if you build your stuff with web, you can embed it in an app. Okay, so you can still build and ship and give apps, and companies like Ludi are doing a lot of stuff with making it look like it's WebGL, but it's really running native and it's really high performance. So there's things you can do depending on what you're doing.
And even Layar and Wikitude, and like
Yeah.
there's web content in the apps. Yeah.
The other side of it is something I won't answer, which I think you were asking, like, what is the interoperability with respect to the image targets and things like that?
that's what we're going to talk about at
Which
6.
is what we're going to talk about later. Well,
Yes, Alex. Could you speak up?
Okay, sorry. It seems that to do or to provide a really good AR experience, we need a really close access to the hardware, control the cameras, sensors, and so on. With the platform maker, Apple, Google, whatever Android, would let a web application get that, accessing the hardware?
Yeah, so Webseal is delivering that sort of access. WebVX will eventually deliver that. WebGL certainly does.
We're not even to OpenVX yet.
and web camera input, whatever it's going to be called.
Sorry?
Not to this, level of synchronization and fine control of the hardware.
So
I think it's inevitable.
I think they will. I mean, to me, that's not the issue. The issue is actually more what you're saying, which is people want apps right now, and the web platforms, independent of WebGL, WebVX, Webseal, are they're just kind of lame. They're not. They don't have everything the desktop components have in them yet, because Apple and Google and Microsoft are slow in getting that stuff on mobile. I think if there was web equivalents to the Khronos chart that Neil showed, we could do fine, and you could convince Qualcomm to, like, and Matayo and all these people to port their trackers into that stuff, right? Because it's one thing to have WebVX, it's another thing to actually have a working tracker on top of it. Mm-hmm. But the technology won't be the problem, right? It will be this stuff. It will be somebody writing a decent tracker for WebVX and Webseal and WebGL. It'll be someone solving those problems. Because once you have the synchronization and have those things working well together, I mean, Rob could talk about what he's doing at W3C, the synchronization and the efficiency of getting video into JavaScript in a format and a manner that doesn't have this horrible latency of buffer copies and data translation. Those things are not really, it's not the hardware, and it's not Apple, and it's not Google, it's just the web standards and what they do.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a couple of optimization options where we can make the image textures available in GLSL as textures without having to go through the DOM. That's a massive optimization that we're discussing. So I think there's a whole bunch of things like that. The web technologies still have so far to go in terms of optimization, and yet they still run quite well now. So we haven't even started with the optimization yet.
Any other questions, ideas? Yes.
I was wondering about, like, now, I mean, most things that you see now that are also split in, it's like you have like the reality, and then secondly the HTML5 stars when you have like the overlay of those things. And I was recently, as I was playing around, and I like really a lot of issues with it, but it was just an idea that I said, hey, what if I'm going to translate that reality into, for example, canvas model? So I started, for example, just with a photo, just translate it into, canvas format. The cool thing was that I could pick out, certain colors, for example, and actually integrate, so I could get rid of the actual layer and just start into working into the actual actual image. Of course, I know a lot of problems if you do with video and rendering, and I was happy that I was able to get a 100 pixel canvas up, but it just, I was wondering if that's something maybe you guys are working on, thinking about, like, really literally altering the actual image. And I think like 1805, I mean, besides all performance issues, actually do that.
Have a look at ChezDetoys. So there's a whole community of people that write shaders that just take the streams of array buffers and jazz on them, like do the most amazing eye candy stuff. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, so that's one example, ChezDetoys, that, and people are writing that, and it's available open source?
It's a whole community. So it's
a whole
like,
community.
It's like GitHub, but for shaders. And so you go to a page, it shows you the shader, you see it running, and you can fork it and make your own changes, and it's awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you guys know of any other open source projects besides the ones that you're either working on or you plan on, in Fridolin's case, that could be relevant? Or are there people in the audience that know of other open source projects, libraries that are available? A lot of people would like to be able to work in these communities, but they're not aware of them.
Open source web or just open source?
Open source for AR.
But not necessarily just web.
You're right.
Okay.
One
There's
example
lots.
is, it's called BU, BU, no, what is it called? The one TU Munich, UBI, the letter U, the letter BI track. Technical University of Munich is, it's been open source, you said, for a couple of years. Is what I got just an email back today. I think I haven't read it yet. But it is up on GitHub, and I don't know, did you download it and try it?
I mean, so I've been, UbiTrack, it's been out for a while. It's aimed at integrating a bunch of different sensor packages and tracking packages, although it doesn't have its own tracking components within it.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of, on the web side, there's not a lot of computer vision tracking available right now. Although I'm still in the category of people who, when I see JSR Toolkit running on a mobile Android browser, I still
You get excited.
can't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because it is like,
runs,
it's amazing. It runs.
To Graz, like 2 years ago, to Graz showed at ISMA an amazing one running in the web, but because of licensing, and that's the reason that the web drives open source. Once you publish JavaScript, people can read it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of the other issues with the web in terms of business is there's still no security model, right? So
You have to embrace it. So.
you have to, except, there's no security model. I mean, there's a bunch of desktop stuff that, all of the AR Toolkit stuff is open source. There are issues with different open source licenses. Some people love GPL, some people can't use it for various reasons. I found there's a few different trackers that are available that are pure web, but that were cross-compiled with Emscripten, right? So one of the things that's happening more now is the ability to cross-compile C, C++ into JavaScript or into ECMAScript as well, which you're seeing more of. I mean, searching on GitHub will find stuff.
We have one more question, and then I would like us to get to demos, because I don't want to run out of time.
There's a whole lot of stuff that's happening. So that was one of the points that I had about why the augmented web stuff is different from AR. So AR at the moment really focuses on image tracking, geo tracking, and maybe object tracking, SLAM stuff. There's a whole wealth of other types of things that the web does. There's some great neural network stuff. There's a great demo this guy does. It runs in WebGL. It's the neural network, and he teaches it in a few moments to track his cat. His cat's called Dude, and he makes a Dude tracker. And whenever it sees the cat, it goes beep, 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 beep. And you can run it in your browser. It's quite good.
Yeah, level 3.
On your desktop?
Amazing.
Yeah.
On the desktop?
No, it runs on
the web browser.
Yeah, but the quality
On a mobile
of the speed's
browser.
not so.
Yeah. Okay, yes.
Is there an equivalent working group or something for the trackers and sensors?
I don't know of a
Streaming.
AR community that's working on the trackers. That could be an outcome of the conversation we're going to have at 6. We're talking about CV interoperability, but it's not what I don't know of one. Do you, Blair? You have a question on your face?
No, I was just wondering, working group in the context of web or open or...
Standards?
Open source standards
There is
I
also
mean-
another aspect that we haven't really talked about, and that is the naming authority side, right? I believe that some parts of this need to be in the public domain. We can't allow something as important as that this is called a microphone, and this is a specific microphone from Shure that has a specific URN, to be just unregulated completely and maybe even locked into some specialist repositories. There needs to be a public side that makes sure that the trackers and the URNs are available so the AR broad scale revolution can take place.
Like the DNS.
You mean like a registry?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I think
And
somebody...
the reasoning part, so that you
registry,
know that this is a
Outback,
microphone.
Outpush, yeah.
So Neil, do you know of any, I mean, aside from the MPEG groups and then things like stream input and stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. Community. So the answer to your question is probably look in OpenCV community. That there would be some trackers there, perhaps, that would be implemented.
But like you said, it's either prototyping or deep research. It's not commercial. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. So thank you, gentlemen. How do we want to organize the demonstrations? Okay, I say how we're going to organize the demonstrations is that I'd like to have the web AR browser, no, not the web, the AR browser interoperability demonstration happen up here. So Rob, you're leaving, you're not going to be able to show augmented web demos.
No,
okay. Okay, and I'd like to ask Fridolin to take your, the browser, to demonstrate the ARG browser with the activity model and so forth. Can you put that in the back so that we're going to show interoperability between Layar browser and Wikitude browser here, and then show the activity model in the back? Does anybody else have anything they would like to demonstrate? Any cool things you're doing that you could demonstrate showing open interoperable tools, technologies? No, not right now. So for the next 30, 40 minutes, feel free to come and visit Fridolin, come and visit Dirk and Martin if you want to see some examples. And then if you're interested in computer vision-based interoperability, come and see us at 6 o'clock in room 212. Thank you, everybody. I'll let you to your own whims, and hope you enjoyed and found this valuable.